evening, everybody, again, and thanks for sticking around. It's been a long day. So we'll try to make this quite interactive. We have a great panel, and we'll talk about the imperative of growth and basically the whole of investment in the region. And we're lucky, we have both practitioners at different levels, both in the private sector, but also from international financial institutions. So Dr. Kamel, let me start with you, and I'll follow the order of the program. What is your perspective in investing in the region, and particularly, can you tell us how it has evolved over the past couple of years? And also, is it profitable? Are you making money in the region, investing?
Good question, good question. So I think since 2011, when is the world of this side, of the European side and the Western side, see the change as a good news. But then for us was a bad news because the change was made in a very, very wrong way. So we found ourselves to found another strategic to invest. We had really a very hard time. You know that without security, stability is no investment, and no foreign investor can invest 1 cent to a country you have no basis stability. Yes, let's see what I'm saying. We are not going to say long project, long big investment. We say small investment, big return, big impact, high return. Yes. We traveled ourselves to the nation we supposed time to time to work and talking by phone and send emails. Then we traveled and we see the people ourselves, talking to the people face to face, what are the need, what is the aim, what is the people really, the need of the people. We wanted to be very near the people, the population and their heart to say what you need, not only of the government side. On the government side, we related to the World Bank, IFC, we related to the, but yes, we changed our strategy and you say yes, profitable. Because why? Because we choose small investment and being every day, let's say every month, every week with our partners. And I think for what has happened in the region, and each nation has its own problem, each nation has its own turmoil, and I think if you go forward, talk to the people, stay with them, talk the need of the nation, then you can change your strategy and then you can have a return.
If I had 10 million to invest in the region, where would you advise me to invest it?
Well, you know.
Quickly.
Quickly. No. I think we would like to invest in every country we think is needed. We would like to invest in the country we can give added value to them. We can support the growth of the people, the growth of their own economy. We would like to invest in, we don't have any different, any spot of the region. We invest. For us, it's important Africa, North Africa, and Middle East.
Ilham, you're in the energy sector. Can you give us your perspective? It's a heavily regulated market where you face public policy makers. What's your experience investing in the region, and particularly in renewable energies, where the largest potential in the world actually lies in the Sahara Band, just below the Mediterranean?
Absolutely. Well, it's absolutely true that the region, throughout the MENA region, if you want to talk about Middle East and North Africa, there are huge potential for energy, and we would talk about energy potential. It's not just about solar or wind. Everybody knows about the fossil fuel endowment in the region. The issue with the investment in the region is that all of these projects, they only have return when their strategy is long-term investment. You cannot, and I'm sure my colleagues will confirm, you cannot dig wells and expect to have return on your investment in a matter of 1 year when you are doing oil or gas projects. So naturally, the investors are looking into projects that over the period of 20, 25 years, they could have return on their investment and also continue having profitable business. When I was back in school, the very first thing we learned was investors are like butterflies. So if they are scared, they fly away. What I've actually now learned with all the turmoil that the region is going through, that in the last 2 days we've heard a lot of examples, I understood that actually there are some investors that are like rhinos. Why? Because they have been able to develop mechanisms that they can manage all of these risks. And of course, we're dealing in a region that has historically gone through a lot of bad experiences. Of course, colonialism is a part of it. The Iranian experience of coup d'etat, for example, during the Mossadegh time, where the Western intervention actually created a scar that still people are having that sense of, and especially the host governments, the policymakers, still have that sense of garage, the pessimism, the paranoid feeling that what if? And of course, it's a time that people will move on and start making benefits from the investment capabilities that is out there for the benefit of their own people. So it's really a matter of the government and also the investors working together and trying to come up with mechanisms that it's a win-win solution is created. So for investment and for investors, it's a matter of risk management. Don't forget that the investors have to deal with many, many risks. It's not just the political risk. It's not just about the security risk. They have to manage market risk as well. And we just heard from the CEO of Eni today that just in a matter of a few days, 25% oil price volatility, and believe me, for investors, it's really scary. So risk management, which is developing, the mechanism is developing. Investors are doing really good, but at the same time, the host states being appreciative of the fact that they have to have full cooperations when it comes to dealing with the investors to make sure that they create a safe and secure bedding for them to create value in those markets.
Mrs. MARIE-NELLY, you are the country director for the World Bank for several countries of the region. What's your assessment in terms of the priorities for investment in the region? And particularly, I know you have a passion about entrepreneurship and also cross-border investment in network infrastructure within the region, and how you've seen the situation evolve over the past couple of years as well.
First of all, I'd like to pick the point that you made, which is to listen to the people, understand the needs. And this morning, I was at the session in Tunisia, and people were saying, well, they succeeded in having a political transition, but the economic transition is not there, they are not creating jobs, and people are frustrated. So I think that we need to see that we have several types of private sectors. The first issue that I see is that how, for the formal sector, we create a level playing field. We know that part of the crisis came from the frustration of some private, the people, the young operators not being able to enter in certain markets. It is not written, but I think that the issue of competition, creating opportunities to enter, is absolutely critical. Secondly, I think that we need to handle the small private sector. There is a lot of potential. Actually, I spent last week in Tunisia. I was in the south of the country, in the oasis in the Tozer region. Then I went to the west in the near Kasserine in Septla. And you see that you have a lot of very small value chains that can be developed. We are talking of dates, we are talking on olive oil, and the bulk of the olive oil of Tunisia, and by the way, a bit the same in Morocco, is sold in bulk. So how do we work on this value chain and to come to provide the support to the operators, the people on the ground, so that they can see the benefit, so that the value added of their product is not in Italy or anywhere in Europe. I'm saying Italy because we are in Italy, but I could mention any other country. Now, what we also see is that there is an emerging new economy, and I truly think that perhaps this is where the region will be able to leapfrog. We have a number of graduates. We heard this morning that they are unemployed, but they are educated. And in fact, it's a tragedy that they cannot find opportunity. We feel that with this new economy, if the conditions are met, in fact, we can have startup of global significance. I can give you a few examples. I was in Tunisia, I was in Morocco, I was in Algeria, and each of these countries, you have these young startups that are coming with ideas in terms of, solution using the IT technology, connecting to global markets, having solutions, sophisticated solutions for even health, to name a few. So what is needed there is that, first of all, we see that the region has the lowest broadband capacity. And it's not only in terms of access, but in terms of speed. And here you have Morocco, for example, which started very well with the mobile telephony in the early 2000s, has been totally left by a number of Eastern Europe countries in terms of speed of internet and capacity. So I think that that is one important. Second link with that, of course, it will be to open the market in terms of digital payments. And I'm glad to see that actually the governors of the central bank are starting to talk to each other to see how to create interoperability for payment system, because how can they be connected if they cannot really access, be able to pay? And then you have all these platforms. It's actually pleasing to say now that people connect and reserve their apartment through Airbnb. You now have Karim, which is a platform like Uber that can generate a lot of jobs and that is emerging. So how do we help create, the regions to benefit from this platform? The youth are there and they can do it. Let me perhaps say that we need to develop training, coding, for example, coding skills. When I go in Europe, I see that they are looking for a number of people young from the Maghreb that have the skills. So how do we create this, again, this enabling environment? Let me add, because you mentioned the regional dimension. I see several areas in the regional dimension. Actually, we are working to help set up a startup network of the Maghreb where they can share resources. If one person has an idea, if Tunisia that is of significance for Morocco, it can be implemented there. Connect them to the global value chain, connect them to the Silicon Valley, connect them to Shenzhen, connect them also to Bangalore in India. So I think that creating this platform, and more importantly, what I see I found quite interesting, is to push the enabling environment. The youth in Tunisia told me, we wanted to have this startup framework, the Startup Act. We went to the National Assembly and we sat and we said, we are looking at you. If you don't adopt this text, you will see what will happen. This is the fastest text adopted in history of Tunisia. Now there are a number of others, so it's a matter of creating the momentum. The Moroccan now are saying, Tunisia has the best Startup Act, maybe we can have a better one and we can build on what they have done. So it's really creating this competition. At a very operational level, I was in Tunisia, in the south of Tunisia, as I told you, in the Oasis. And they told me, actually, we are working with the Oasis on the other side, on the Algeria side. And you have the products, in French we say les produits du terroir, that are sold at Fauchon at high price. How do we make sure that these bioproducts are being structured and commercialized in a positive way? A lot can be done. They told me, if you look at Gabès, it's easier for somebody in eastern Algeria to market, to channel their products through the port of Gabès instead of going 1,000 kilometers east to Algeria. So I believe that sub-regional solution between Tunisia and Algeria, we spoke, as we speak, there is a discussion on Libya. Hopefully, Libya will be back, and also with Libya. So we can identify very innovative solutions, but we need to bring the youth, and this is why we are now in each country, not to stay in Tunis or in Rabat, but to go in the countryside, and we are about to open our office in Tripoli just to walk the talk.
Good. Mr. HEILBRONN, you're vice president for the a newcomer in the region, which is the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development. And you've been quite active in very specific areas, in particularly small and medium-sized enterprise, and also working through the financial markets. And I think you're also one of the most concrete application of the Deauville sort of process. So can you share with us a little bit your experience over the past couple of years as well?
Thank you very much. Deauville partnership you mentioned was a starting point of awareness-raising exercise following the Arab Spring, thinking that there was huge potential of this region, both developing democratic societies, but also developing the economies of these countries. And in 2011, the G8, but afterwards all our shareholders, pushed us to expand geographically to this region based on the experience we had for many years in the East, and helping transitioning these countries of ex-Soviet Union to market economies. This seemed to be at a time where there were huge hopes about solving all problems very quickly. Last years have been sometimes very challenging and extremely, at least different from the initial vision, with a civil, at least tension in the societies, an economic situation which did not improve as much as expected, and also big challenges, demographic challenges. Marie-Françoise mentioned also this huge also challenge of this youth, which doesn't find professional opportunities locally, and also very strong disparities within countries, with a lot of aggregation of activities near big towns, much less developed regions in each of the countries we have started our work. But the picture is not gloomy at all, at least from our point of view. First, because when you look at what has been achieved in the framework of the Deauville Partnership, probably the expansion of EBRD to the south of the Mediterranean has been the most concrete, and some would say the only very visible byproduct of this commitment by heads of state at G8 level. We've invested more than 8.5 billion euros in these countries, over 200 projects. Egypt will become this year the first country of operation of EBRD. And in Morocco, Tunisia, Jordan, all these countries have become really central, and sometimes, surprisingly enough, 70% of our investment, more than 70%, is in the private sector. When you think about the importance of the public sector in many of the economies, you can consider that it's a very good surprise. What was mentioned about the dynamic economic foundations of these societies is something we see wherever I go to the countries. We have opened for quite now several months and years also offices outside the capital city, because we believe, like Marie-Françoise mentioned, that we have to deal not only where everybody is in terms of international institutions, with the creation of and financing of big companies, but we have to go and to reach SMEs much more remote, in remote regions. So, for example, we open in Sfax, in Tanger, in Alexandria, and will not go into all the projects we have in that front. In terms of focus, you mentioned the challenge of financing the economies. These are economies where obviously the banking sector is sometimes very developed, but with poor performance sometimes. NPLs ratios sometimes very high as the highest ones of our other regions. So the question of access to finance, be it women, be it entrepreneurs, small SMEs, which were mentioned before, but also through means which are not the banking system, is very important. So that's why we are very much focusing on also helping access to capital market and access also to transaction in local currency. Bringing also the resources of donors, of the European Commission, but also bilateral donors, which allow also to take more risk and lend in local currency, which is nearly in this region, more than 30% of our investments are in local currency, which is an extremely important element in terms of resilience of these economies, especially when, for some countries, Egypt being a good example, the foreign exchange market is freed progressively or more rapidly according to the different countries. When you think about Morocco, Tunisia, and Egypt, for example, you have different situation there, but in all these countries, developing also the means to access capital markets and local currency transaction, very important. It's very linked to our focus on SMEs, obviously you mentioned, and that's one of the big priority. The other priority I will mention, and probably we can discuss about that, is everything which is linked to infrastructure and energy. Renewable energy is one of our main priority. We try to, as much as possible, to share also the very successful experience in some of our countries of operation, Jordan being probably one of the most successful one, where prices of energy production decreased by 85% in a very few years, where we developed huge investment and attracted also a lot of investment in Jordan, but also in Egypt, where we are financing the largest solar plant in Africa. And all that is extremely important, obviously, to decrease the dependency on fossil fuel, but also in bringing more also to the final customer in terms of value for the money which is paid by him for the delivery of these services.
Okay, so if we look at the region, as a whole, and of course it's on average, there is a complex balancing act that policymakers have to achieve. Debt has increased. The macroeconomic situation for many countries is a bit more tense than, let's say, pre-2011 with the crisis. At the same time, there are very important demands from the younger generation. So time is of the essence, and the speed of delivery of government is at the heart of basically what should be good economic policies for higher investments and higher jobs, etc. What, from your perspective, and maybe we start with you again, Kamel, what should they be doing in terms of their policy framework, and what would be the priorities given this very complex sort of balancing act governments have to achieve under pressure?
Yeah, I think we are always, like yesterday and today, talking about large project, large investment, large infrastructure is important, yes, for the government. But again, we are looking so far away. We are not looking down. Mm-hmm. We have here a gap, okay? Now, why each government, I think, is a government policy to seek and to go and to look what her own people need, what the need of the people. The basic needs first. If you don't see the basic need of the people, you are not going to reach long or the large project. Large projects take time. Large projects take big investment. Large projects sometimes start and never finish. Because you know why? Because the institution, the World Bank, the IFC, the European Bank, they are not taking into consideration the heart of the people. They invest, but if you don't have the heart of the people in the need, yes, my sister, I'm not,
Small is beautiful.
Yes, so it's beautiful. But you know something is, he say about...
Big is better, they will say.
What I say, he's talking about investment, large investment and solar project is fine. We need energy. Everybody needs it. But what about...
But let me push you a little bit further, because the heart of you speak like a politician.
I'm not a politician.
I'm
an investor.
But you've been answering about, the heart. Concretely, what does it mean? I am in a mid-sized town living in Morocco, wherever in the region. It's 50, 60,000 people living in this, I'm a grad school. I've completed 2 years at the university. What is your policy for me? I give you my heart. What you do? What's your policy for me?
Let's start about what you need to think page.
Concretely.
Concretely. Healthcare, education, and you build a social housing for people in need. We have an example. We are, as a chairman of Gruppo San Donato Healthcare, we own 22 hospitals, 2 universities. We started to do is smart clinic, smart project, smart investment. And we did it in North Italy in many shopping centers. When we wanted to be very near the people, when you have any problem, you don't have to wait to go to the hospital. So what we do is, what we are doing aim to export this know-how, this technology to the city, small city in Africa, in Morocco.
So efficient delivery of public services, cost-effective.
Yes.
Good. Same question.
Obviously, it's very important that in addition to understanding the need of the local people, they want jobs. Okay. They want, and then don't forget the power of the media, the social platforms. I am sitting in Morocco, and I see in Egypt, mamma mia, they have this huge mall setting up, and people are playing bowling, and et cetera, et cetera. I want that. And those guys, as Kamel mentioned, they're not going to wait for the policymakers to put all this long-term planning and then find the money and then let's see what's going to happen. And by the time this government has changed and the next government, which is actually against all sort of hobby for the youth, right? So being very, we are in a time of, sometimes it's very unfortunate, but you have to be very quick. You have to be very quick because the cost of delaying on putting down the money and executing the project is very high. Of course, the other issue, in addition to respecting and understanding the need of the local people, is to understand their capacity, their capabilities, what they have that through that particular capability we could create value for them, hence the job creation. You cannot set up, this is the mistake that has been happening everywhere around the world. You cannot have a steel factory in a city that you have to import the iron ore thousands of kilometers away. This is one basic example, right? And so that's also respecting what is
I hear
there.
both of you, the spirit of decentralization and getting closer to people. And it means how we organize also locally the state and devolutions of power. Marie-Françoise, maybe your perspective. And you mentioned technology as being a...
Sure. Actually, I see a two-pronged approach. It is true that, when I look at the Maghreb, before working on the Maghreb, I worked for 15 years in sub-Saharan Africa. And in some sense, when you arrive in the Maghreb, you almost sometimes think that you are in a paradise because you have a minimum infrastructure. We have to acknowledge that. In each of our countries, you go north to south, you have the main infrastructure. But now what happened is that the government put both, the essential resources for that. Investment rate in Tunisia, let me start with Algeria, 45%. Morocco, 33%. Tunisia, 23%. So high level of public investment. So to me, the first element is that how the state will now step out and said, I want to let the private sector come in. You mentioned energy. There is significant space for the private sector to come in. Pierre mentioned, in the case of Egypt. So how do we have the policy environment so that the state stays a regulator and then let the private sector step in so that things can be done properly, because there will be a need of expansion. We've just computed a study in Morocco, and we see that the investment needs in infrastructure for the next 10 years are in the range, depending on the option that you take, between 6 to 18% of GDP. So somebody has to input the money. So that, I think that the policy framework needs to be put in place, and I think that there is a need to make a major shift from public investment to private investment, with, of course, a necessarily enabling environment. Coming back to the local level, fully agree that we need to give space. I mean, this morning again, Tunisia was mentioned. And it was not long ago that Tunisia had elected mayors. We have a project in Tunisia, quite interesting, which allows the citizen, to respond to your concern, that can come to say, these are our needs. This is what we want at the local level. We need this road that is missing. Actually, I went next to Tabarka. They needed a road to go to their cemetery, and the road was not there. Now, with that, the mayor can allocate the resources to look at, the needs and be very specific. I think that also what we see, because of this potential of the youth, there is a need to have the ecosystem. And it is not just the law, the Startup Act, but the space. You go outside Tunis, you go outside Rabat or Casablanca, and you have nothing. We had a meeting in the techno park of Casablanca. There was a young lady, she said, I had to make 500 kilometers for Agadir to come to this meeting to be able to discuss issues. I think that what is emerging, and I really like that very much, is public-private coming together to have these youth spaces where you will have minimum access to internet, possibility to have these skills, these soft skills. You want to learn how to write a good CVs and so forth. And I think that this ecosystem is coming. But let me add also that it is very important to look at the other policy issues. I would say, the elephant in the room that people don't want to talk about. Because ultimately, you are competing with the global. You are in Morocco, you are in Tunisia, you are in Algeria, you are competing with Asia. I was just in Asia in Bali for the annual meetings. So there are some critical reforms that are required. The labor market, do we have the flexibility of the labor market to allow, this to happen? Is our unit cost competitive enough, This private sector, enabling environment that I was mentioning. So I think that it is very important to work on these key issues, what I would call the second generations of reform, so that the region can compete at the global level, and at the same time use the opportunity of the emerging empowerment. We see that social media are being used. They could be used extremely positively to channel, information, after all, People are complaining. I mean, we had a boycott in Morocco. We have, take each country to the complaint. These are outlets, to build on what you said, that can use to allow, the youth say, this is what we need, how we can work together. So I believe that having that structured approach allows to maybe have a multifaceted response to a very complex issue. So.
I think you just mentioned Sub-Saharan. I was in Rwanda 2 weeks ago, and I think Rwanda should be taken as an example for the entire world. Not just Africa, not just Middle East, not Japan, not America, for the entire world. And after what this country went through, how they managed to turn it around. And this is exactly what you're mentioning, that everyone in Rwanda is working so hard to make sure that things will happen, will materialize. So that's just one comment.
Yeah. Yes, maybe just to build on to build on what has just been said. I think one of the main challenge and what should be even further developed is empowering the economies, the communities, much more than what has been done until now. It doesn't rely only on us, international institutions. We have to push for that. It depends also on decision by the states in each countries. And what has been said also about the municipal sector is extremely important. I was, for example, also in Sfax, where I met the Conseil Municipal. There, now with an extraordinary story about democratic empowerment at the municipal level. Afterward, the question is how this will translate into more prosperity, more understanding of the local needs. And that's where we have to work hand in hand with these people at the local level to build not only and not only to finance the project, but to advise, to build the capacity on the local level so that these projects at sometimes are at a stage where they can be financed and bring the value at the local level. So that's very important. The second issue is, I think, creating the clusters which make also the economies in a position where they can connect to the other regional countries, but also the outside world beyond that. Asia was mentioned. And that, for example, what we're doing in economic zones, for example, in Egypt with the Swiss economic zone, is not about only building infrastructure. It's about building the soft connectivity, which goes with that, understanding the bottlenecks to investment, working on the investment climate, the rules, the very basic rules, which are defined at the national level, but also at the local level, to increase the attractiveness also for domestic investors, but also for international investors. I would dispute the fact that big things are ugly, because because I think there are, you know, the development of the renewable energy sector brought a lot of investors in Egypt, which didn't know Egypt before, and it is extremely also important in terms of creation of jobs. So we have to do that. We have to do also SME support, but probably both are very important.
Yeah, as Pierre is saying,
Mark, and then we'll ask,
I think, as we say in French, it's fromage et dessert, not fromage ou dessert. But the point that I wanted to pick on an important point that you mentioned, because I felt it very strongly, because I've been going outside Rabat, outside Casablanca, outside Tunis. And it's the issue of dignity. I felt that the people, they want to be heard. They want that somebody comes to listen, and actually they have some concrete solutions that they can offer. And I think that we tend to think of the capacity, but what struck me most through my 1 week in Tunis, outside Tunis, was this notion of really being there for them, being there able to listen to what they are saying, how they can resolve it, and take it from there.
Yeah, I think that's the notion, that devolution locally. So we'll take a couple of questions. Can we have a mic, Malik, from? I think we have one question here, one there, another there.
Thank you, Hassan Abouyub, Ambassador of the Kingdom of Morocco to Italy. I listened carefully to all your presentations, taking into account the title of this panel, Shared Prosperity. It happened that in the last few months, I followed a major sensitive issue, the code of conduct that the European Union invented recently when it comes to incentives. So my question to the panel members, tax exemptions should be remaining one of the major drive for investment, because it's put into question. And all the architecture we built in North Africa, Tunisia, Algeria, Morocco is threatened by the adhesion, imperative adhesion to this new code of conduct. And Pierre, I'm sure you're aware of that. Yeah, and many countries. I think Tunisia is about to be facing quite hard times. What's your advice? What's your impression and assessment about that? Thank you.
Thanks very much, Adel Hamazia, Chatham House and Oxgaps. Thanks very much for wonderful presentations and insights. I'd be interested to hear thoughts on any of the following. Marie, you mentioned the role of entrepreneurship Here, of course, I'm sure you're referring to possibilities with the informal sector as well. One of the shortcomings for many IFIs and others who've worked on the region and also sub-Saharan Africa is they're there for the beginning, there for the public relations, but when it comes to scalability and moving forward, they disappear. So I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on that. And along with entrepreneurship, the other big thing that we need in the region, infrastructure was mentioned, public-private partnerships we've heard about and what that looks like. Infrastructure is a must, linking Tunisia from north to south. We've just seen the train between Tangier and Kaza and Rabat and so on, which is excellent. Could you say a little bit about where European companies stand here? Because as far as I've seen, they're not particularly competitive when it comes to the infrastructure side. And any comments on where China fits into all of this? Thanks so much.
Adnan, next to you, he's just here.
Good afternoon, a couple of friends in this panel, Adnan from Morocco. My practical question, how can we translate this into local policies? Because most governments in the regions, they understand these ideas, but when you try to shift the conversation from classical FDI to local value creation through innovation or whatever, there's a lot of talking and very few action. So practical question, how to translate these policy recommendations into local government infrastructure and investment? Thanks.
Any other questions? So we go back to the panel. Maybe, Pierre, we start with you. There was a technical question on the code of conduct. I'm not very political question on the code of conduct and taxes and...
Yes, I don't know if I'm the best place to answer this question. It is obviously an important requirement which has been set at the European level. We're not a European institution stricto sensu because we are a multilateral organization. But obviously, what is required is a holistic approach to development and probably looking at the different elements in the policy of European member states and the European Union is one of the challenge. We could talk about also other examples which are linked to local, for example, content requirements in the energy sector, which is quite a burning question where there is probably an exercise of understanding also why some of these rules have to be changed over time, because it's not a good way of proceeding to be non-transparent and to be protectionist, and all economists know that. In the same time, you have to be also realistic and supportive of public authorities on that road. And it's the balance which is very much required, because it's impossible also to forbid to some countries what has been the practice of also the most developed countries 20 years ago. So I think this is the way forward. And I understand that also on this question of the requirement of the code of conduct, there are progress, also practical terms. So I wouldn't be so negative about where we are now.
Ilham, maybe you want to pick some of the
No,
points?
I just thought that how could this be translated into the local, government policy making. There is a truth, and everybody has to understand it. There are governments, and more importantly, there are people who are not as sophisticated as those that are running Europe or the US, etc., etc. You have to understand that you should speak the language of the public. You cannot go and try to expect locals' contribution if they do not understand what is the project IRR. You just can't. There is a huge gap between where we as investors stand and where the local people are. Here, there has to be some people that could translate this, that could respect the local, help them to understand the basics. They don't have to know all the sophisticated, intellectually motivating stuff that you and I will learn in Cambridge, Harvard, etc., etc., and which, by the fact, we were privileged to happen to be there. So it doesn't mean that if they haven't haven't been there, they are not a part of the elite, which maybe they are not, but they also have to be respected. Their voice has to be heard, and they should be helped to understand the concept that why we want to do this for them. And of course, it's then there is a political, there is a local support, there's a social support behind any decision.
But if I understand correctly, the question was more about what Marie-Françoise was saying about dignity and space and access to resources, and how do you translate this concretely in the possibility for a younger generation to dream its future and to be able to invest with some easiness to access some basic, the services that you mentioned. So I think that's a very important dimension that any public policy has to carefully think about its operational dimension at the smallest, the local level in a municipality somewhere on the territory. I think it's very important. Marie-Françoise, maybe you want to...
Just to build on that, I think it's a very good point, and the challenge is how to make that a key element of public policies of the government. And I want to give two concrete examples because I really like talking very pragmatically, one in Morocco and one in Tunisia. In Morocco, we supported in the northeastern of the country, for those who know Morocco, in the Nador region, a project which is an integrated coastal zone management, where you have agriculture, planting olive trees, where you have the fishermen developing the activities, where you are developing honey with the young women that were leading that, and in a way where the communities were actually the one that decided what they wanted to do, and the resources were channeled at the local level in terms of the choices, the procurement choices. That worked very well. And actually, this is a region where the Moroccan community from this region is mainly in the Netherlands. They produce, I think, the best honey that I have, but the packaging was not very fancy. So how do you help them improve the packaging? How do you design a brand, market it? And then what I told the Moroccan authorities, because we supported that for a grant of $5 million, I said this should be part of the investment budget because they have a national plan for coastal management that could be replicated along the whole coast and in different ways using the public budget. So these are the challenges because when you see that it works, that the communities are part of it. Let me move to Tunisia. Tunisia has 126 traditional oases. We supported, again, through GEF, the Global Environment Fund, about 5-6 million. It's amazing to see what you can do with 5-6 million to restore 6 of these oases, not only in terms of the production of the quality of the local dates that are excellent, but also promoting ecotourism. That is really one of the most beautiful sites that I've seen, actually. How to now scale it up, because we only supported 6 of them out of the 126. How do we move and to create? I think that at one point, it has to be translated into the public policy of the government, that the communities will be involved in the selection, but we have also to acknowledge that it is something very complex and that takes time. When you want to hear the community, it's not something that you do overnight and you click like that. It took 4 years for this project to be listening to them, their priorities, the conflicts within the communities. I mean, this is a very complex cocktail, but I think that we should now put there, and my view, just to finish at that, I think that now that we have the mayors, the communities, in the case of Morocco, we have a decentralization strategy that is very clear. There are instruments that can channel that. I want to respond quickly, if I may, to the PPP.
It was a question about scalability.
So this is what I'm saying. I think that once you have tested, and by the way, I want to thank the Transition Fund, because the Transition Fund allowed really to test solutions, a number of solutions in various areas, actually. Ecotourism, even in the financial sector, developing a financial inclusion strategy for Morocco. Now, once you have demonstrated it, there is the idea of scaling up, and to me, it has to be part of the government budget It has to become a priority to say we agree to allocate the resources and allow them to do it. I also think that we partners, and I say the World Bank first because I can talk for my institution, we need to facilitate more coordination so that, as I usually say, the whole is more than the sum of the parts. We need to be in a few sectors, we need to let them lead the priorities, and we need to come with the resources. In the case of Morocco and Tunisia, we started to have this platform. Actually, on Monday, I had a meeting with all the partners. We meet to see how to do that more efficiently. But we think that, indeed, the government should be in the driver's seat and tell us, this is how I want to do it.
Okay.
So we cannot replace them.
Thank you, Marie-Françoise.
Yep.
Kamel, you wanted to...
Two things. One, we're talking about, you have to believe what you do, yes? 1994-95, we being the first who invested in Africa when the European, they have doubt about what we're going to do in Africa. Is our investment secure? We believe it. Let me give you a concrete example. We invested in cotton yarn. So we've been very near the farmer in Mali, Burkina Faso, Togo. We finance the micro farmer. We give them money, and then we get paid by the harvest. We give them the product they need. We give them, this is we're talking about 1995. So this means is 1995. Then we say, what is the farmer, what the local need? Why are we going to export their cotton directly to the European when we can have added value? Then we brought the manufacturing to them from the cotton yarn, and then you can have
Textile.
Yeah, textile, and then you can export. So we have the added value, and that's just one. We finance agricultural project to the farmer to build land and to give him what the basic need, and the milk, butter, rice. This was 1994-95. So we've been very near the people. We traveled to Africa for each country, and we ask, what is the basis people need? Even the government this time say, and we say, always we talk to the government, the president, the prime minister, what is in heart? What you want to see that your own people achieve, you have to achieve. And we work like this. Now, with this in agriculture, we build manufacture for mango. We saw this mango, we said, wow, this can be a good business. It was profitable business. I'm not saying we don't make money. We make money. Now, but today is very different. We live in a very different world. Crisis. We have the interest rates going up. Nobody going to give you money for nothing. I mean, I'm talking about World Bank. I'm not talking about the institution where they give you land money. We are not here to beg money from other countries to give us money no. We see, if you're going to finance something, you're going to ask for return. They are not going to give you for free. So what is the cost? What is for the long term? Is this profitable to us or not? I mean, nobody's going to give you money for free. We have a problem in Europe. You can see Italy. Look at the spread. What's happening? Look, is exactly we have. It's so hard to lend, to borrow money. So what about now? We're talking about investing in our region. We need to trust. What this means is for me is the private sector, the private investor have to trust, have to believe, and have to go and believe what he do, and then he can reach. It's only with that we can reach something.
Pierre, you'll have the last word. Quickly, 30 seconds.
Quickly, I would say coordination is extremely important. I think going together like we did in Tunisia on a package, which is not a package only of finance, but a package of hope, of policy reform, is very important to bring ownership at the end of the day on a path towards sustainable development. And I think that's probably the most important thing to do at the national level, but also at the local level.
So I think a strong message came up is really local, close to the people, listening, modesty, I guess, and how to experiment in public policy, constant improvement seems to be one of the key messages coming.
No, I'm just going to say one word for my sister.
Not forget
Yeah.
the deep reform.
Yes, of course, reforms.
One word to my sister. I want to thank my sister because she's really talking about Tunisia. It's make me, because I'm Tunisian, and he's talking about Sfax, and I'm from Sfax. So it's touchable. It's really, like somebody is paying to lobby for Tunisia. And really, it was
Please
great.
join me to thank the panel. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, the last session will take place at the Sforza room, which is just across the corridor on your right. We will